here, and we're just starting there on frame 0. What do we need to do to get this shadow to be looking better? Well, first of all, let's just get this kind of lined up with his feet a little bit better and kind of pulling that there. And you can see that it's going to be really difficult to have this, you know, not penetrating the slightly warped geometry here or his feet. So what we're going to need to do is output this shadow separately from the rest of this scene. So output this shadow into its own scanline render and then merge it back in later. That's also going to give us control over the mix in that merge node so that this doesn't have to be so dark. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to create another scanline render node by hitting the tab key and typing in scan. And remember, as I talked about earlier, that you can use an object or a scene with a scanline render. So don't feel like you have to have this scene node to use the scanline render. You can plug that directly into a object. So any 3D object, you can plug right into that. Now I'm going to unplug that card from the scene because I don't want that to interfere with what I'm doing with the scanline render. And then I've got my other scanline render over here. So now if I wanted to view a flat image in 2D, you're going to notice that I don't see my shadow because I have to look over here for it, and I can't really see it here because it's black, and obviously the background is black. So what do? Well, I need that merge node I was talking about. So let's merge these things together. I'm going to hit the tab key and we'll type in merge. And this might be difficult to remember, you know, which pipe do we use, the A or the B in this case? Well, this is the background where basically all of this other stuff is happening. And we want to put the shadow on top of that essentially. So the B pipe is going to be for our background. So I'll just go ahead and plug that in just like that. And then we'll plug the A pipe into our shadow. Okay, so now we have that plugged into that scanline render, all going into the merge. So now let's go ahead and plug into that merge and see what we can see. So I still can't see it perfectly, but part of that problem could be because we don't have the camera in place. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to pull the camera over here for better access, and we'll plug our camera pipe for our scanline render into our camera. And now you can see there's that shadow. We're still having a little bit of an issue cutting off his foot. So we may need to do the same thing with our actor, which probably wouldn't be a bad idea, as far as merging him in, and we'll merge him in after our shadow. So he'll kind of be going on top of everything else so that the shadow still appears like it's under his foot. But we can worry about that a little bit further down the line. For now, let's get that shadow animated into place. So what we need to do is be able to edit the card that the shadow is on. So that is going to be this bit right here. So what I would like to do is just quickly clear my properties bin, double click my card, and we'll go into our translation and just set keys here for all those properties, X, Y, and Z. You really probably don't want to move it much in the Y, but if we end up needing to, that's a possibility. So let's go ahead and jump back into our 3D view. Excuse me, not the Y. I was thinking more about the Z. It's just been rotated, so that's all a little bit different. So let's go ahead and just kind of skip forward to about frame 50. And you can see I'm going to pull that Y handle and the X to kind of just make that match back up with his feet. And it was working pretty well from that angle that I was at, but now that he's sort of walking up on his card, we'll need to go ahead and go into that Z and push that up as well. So it really feels like that's always remaining in contact with the bottoms of his feet. So you may have to change angles a few times to make sure that that is what's happening. But that doesn't take too very long to take care of. And we may have pushed it forward a little bit too far in the Y, and that's okay. We can just kind of pull that back. Great, so that's lining up really nicely now. And let's look between those two. That still looks pretty good through there. Okay, so that's following along nicely. Let's jump forward to about frame 100, and we're close, but still having a little bit of an issue there in the Y. So let's pull that forward, maybe a little bit over in the X, and let's see what happened between 50 and 100. You can see it's not going to be perfect. So this isn't a technique that you're always going to be able to get away with. But in my case, because I am working with something that is going to be so small, I can really kind of quickly and easily fake this without having to go back and really, you know, evaluate, do we need to reshoot this footage because the shadow wasn't quite right? You know, sometimes you can get away with faking something like this. So that's looking pretty good. I'm just kind of clicking through there, and it looks like about there. We're going to need to push that forward so that still feels like that's in contact with his foot. And by the time we get this blurred out, it is going to look amazing. I mean, that's really one of the great things about compositing, is that everything in life is a little bit blurred. And so once you get everything blurred, if it doesn't match up perfectly, you really can't tell afterwards anyway. So it really is actually a valuable thing to learn. It's not really cheating, especially because we're not really going to be able to tell in the end. So why spend a lot of time doing a lot of extra work that just really wasn't necessary? Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and jump back to our 2D view, and looks like maybe we can move that up just a bit at that point. And right about there still needs a little bit. So kind of looking at it in the 3D and then jumping back over to the 2D gives us a slightly fresh perspective on, you know, what was that really in place properly before. And so you can get it pretty good in the 3D and then do your fine tuning in the 2D mode after you've kind of done the legwork in 3D. Okay, so we're coming up on just about getting that finished. And I have two keyframes right next to each other, which you don't want to do. So I'll go ahead and just delete the one we've got here on 86. So I'll just right click and delete those keys there on 86 and just make sure 85 looks great. And then just again, still clicking through there, making sure that everything is matching up. That's a little too high, so we'll pull that down. And then if we do our input, we can kind of go back in between here. And that still is going to look pretty good once we get him merged back on top. So let's take our merge really quickly and just kind of jump forward in here where we can see a lot of the shadow. And all of a sudden, voila, we have a nice shadow that matches the color of our background. And is going to follow along with him, and you really can't tell that it's not perfectly lining up exactly maybe the way that you would want it to. Now I do want it to be casting this way over to the left a little bit more, so we can work on that when we're kind of fine-tuning a few more things, but so far so good. We don't want the mix turned down so low that we can't see it at all, but we do want it to be close to the same color. So it's a subtle detail but a necessary one. Let's come back in the next lesson and we'll start color correcting our actor a little bit so that he doesn't feel so unintegrated in the scene. The shadow is one step, but he still feels like just the coloring is a little bit off. This is a very green shot, so we need to integrate some of that into his coloration as well. So stick around and we'll be working on the